Well, we're done with the board meeting, but now we have the board briefing. They put the two meetings together. They did the board meeting first, and now they're going to do the board briefing. I guess that's one way to get people to not stick around and watch, because it just goes on forever. You know, it's been hours. It's taken. Look how many days it's taken me to get through this. So let's do part one of the board briefing now.
So hopefully you all have a copy of the presentation in front of you, but also a copy of our just issued draft business plan. So a couple things. Ellen's going to walk you through a short presentation here, just to kind of encapsulate where we are and some of the key elements, and then open it up for any questions some members of the board may have, Mr. President, members of the board. But this culminates, if we go back to the board strategy session this past November, where the board supported and approved management developing and building on all the historical great work and plans that have been in place in the past to produce a forward-looking business plan and approach for the organization. So here that is in front of you today and available for others to comment on over the next month or so. So I guess one of the art is in not writing a long business plan, but an effective one. So if I quote Mark Twain, I think the key is, if I only had more time, I would have written a shorter book. So we've intentionally tried to keep this as tight as we possibly can. There are about 39 key objectives for the organization going on a rolling 5-year plan basis. And underneath that, as Alan will walk you through, a significant number of strategic work that helps us drive to the goals, objectives, measures, and targets in each respective area. In pulling this all together, there's a tremendous amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes, and not one person or two people. It really takes an internal village to pull something of this complexity off while we run the business. So
He just used a Hillary quote. It takes a village. Wasn't that a Hillary? Was it a Hillary book or a Hillary quote, or something to do with Hillary? That other guy on the left there, that's Alan Lado. He's been around a long time, and he's the director of policy planning, I believe. I mean, they have so many execs, it's hard to keep track of them all. But he's been there a long time. I don't know, I don't believe I've met him, or maybe I did actually meet him one time.
I just really want to give a special appreciation to the executive team, the leadership team here, but also with Shelley Devine, Dee Brookshire, spent a tremendous amount of time, in addition to Eric Hessa, who some of you have met, and of course Alan Lato. So it really takes a large group to pull off this. Sometimes these are mind-bending Rubik's Cube kind of topics. I would also like to thank specifically Directors Prosser and Director Simmons for helping us and be some of our conscience and our guide through this. They were, while we're learning while we go through this too, I think they both gave tremendous insights and some really poignant suggestions for us, which we believe we've actually captured and reflective in what you see in front of you today. So a big thank you to both of them as well. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Alan right now. We'll walk it through, and at the very end, happy to answer any questions or comments you may have. I will suggest that once we get to the final product, there will be a very, very extensive internal communication process. So we will have to unbundle what looks simple, I'll call it simply complex, a simple process at the highest level, and unbundle that, and that will take a tremendous amount of energy and communication effort, not only once, but suggesting over and over and over again. If things go well, it doesn't end. So with that, over to you, Alan.
I don't know what they're talking about, but this is how the meeting starts. It assumes that we know what they're talking about. I guess it's some kind of 5-year plan that I was unaware of. And it was interesting listening to him talk about, of course, you know, Kelsey is all typical. He's your refined technocrat. Looks good, talks good, thinks fast. But what struck me about that was how he said all of these internal executives collaborated in that, and 2 members of the board put in some kind of input. But guess who's missing from being part of that? No drivers, no union people, and no riders. So the people that actually run the system and use the system were not part of this process. And how many times do I have to bring this point up, is that there's this group, technocracy. The technocracy owns the system. It's their system. We, the rest of us, live or die by their hand. And that's everything in this country nowadays. Everything is this way. You know, the citizens are not considered in anything anymore. We're subject to whatever these people in power throw our way, but we have no input on any of it.
Great, thank you. I will walk or perhaps jog you through this, given the time. So briefly, as Doug mentioned, when we were with you at your board retreat back in November, we actually went through the premises and strengths and challenges that are now reflected in the report, and we've been developing elements as we go forward. All of these, as I think Doug mentioned, are very much focused on Trimet staff and Trimet ability to deliver on our vision, mission, values. This is a largely internally focused plan. It's one to make sure that we are as effective as possible at delivering the already defined policies, vision, mission, values, goals, and expectations of our public and our riders.
Vision, mission, that's a new one. Our vision, mission, wow.
So our process has, in developing that, has really coalesced around this strategy map, this pyramid of explaining how our 12 well-defined goals fit into 4 categories: financial, people and innovation, internal business practices, and customers. And we really came.
I wish I could read that chart. I can't read what's written there. I'm sure you can't either if I can't. But these people are so good at coming up with these charts and graphs and tables. I mean, really, they've got charts and graphs. That's your neoliberal. That's the neoliberals there. They have charts and graphs, tables and plans. You know, let's not get critical yet. I don't know. Maybe Leto's got something good here.
Came to the idea that this felt like the right way of putting this together, supporting all of it, supporting our vision, mission, values. I do want to emphasize, we don't start at the bottom and then slowly work our way up. We have to propel ourselves on all of these goals to be successful. We have to deliver satisfied riders at the same time that we're paying attention to managing our assets. We have to be able to move forward on all of these. So what I'm going to do is, rather than step you through all the details because you have the draft plan in front of you, I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights. So the first highlight objective is in the financial category for the goal of managing assets to ensure safety and optimize value, performance, and resiliency. This is in the plan, objective number 3. And what we've done is identify for each of these goals 1 or more objectives, and then for each objective 1 or more measures and targets, and key strategic actions that will actually make some progress on that, so that in each subsequent year, as we update the rolling 5-year plan, we will have a better indicator as we go of how much progress we are making on this, whether we are making progress, and whether we need to adjust or add to our key strategic actions to actually make progress. So in this case, the measure is the annual percentage of new service enhancement. That is, how much more service are we putting out? Our target, based on the regional transportation needs, is a minimum of 2.1% average growth. We are well above that for this year, proposed for FY18, and we were above that for FY17. This is an average over the course of the first 5 years of the plan, recognizing that there are ebbs and flows in our ability to do that.
That's an interesting number, 2.7%, because it's less than 3% raises that all the executives give themselves every year. They give themselves 3% raises every year. The growth of the system is at 2.7%, which I just find that ironic. Although he says the last 2 years it's been greater than 2.7. I know that McFarland says they're going to increase service by 4% next year.
And the key strategic action here is to be able to prioritize those operating funds amongst all the other needs that a large agency like us has. You can see, I will not read through, but you can see the other objectives within the financial category to meet those 3 goals, to make sure that we are fiscally sound and compliant, that we are appropriately managing our assets, and that we are retaining the ability to fund that growth over time that the region needs. On the second layer, the people and innovation, I wanted to call out one specific objective, that is achieving a sense of open and honest communication between management and frontline employees. And the measure for this is an internal...
That's pretty funny given current events and what's happening these days at Trimet, and Trimet officials busting people for 20 seconds late. You know, that doesn't foster good relations when you nitpick your employees like that. I mean, there's a margin of error, and to say you left 20, I just heard that today on the scanner. Some poor driver got busted for 20 seconds late, and I couldn't believe my ears. I mean, so he wants to have better communication between management and people doing the work. Well, that's not happening, okay? You have zero growth there. I can tell you that from my interactions with current operators and what I hear on the radio. So that's you know, pie in the sky. He's talking bullshit right now.
Survey that we do of an employees. There's one that's very comprehensive that happens every couple of years, and there's a smaller, more targeted one that happens quarterly, updating that so that we can track. It's the same basic question. We can track how we do on it with a particular with 4.1 average out of 5. And the strategy here, the strategic action, is to develop a more comprehensive strategy to strengthen the internal communication channels, which we of course do, but it needs more and more emphasis, especially with frontline employees, including more face-to-face communication. You can see objectives 5 through 12 all speak to that people in innovation. Excuse me. Including the one I just mentioned, but some of the others around affirmative action goals, around making sure that we have a plan for succession as people retire at Trimet, and fostering employee innovation. And then moving on to looking at, I think I just went the wrong way. Oh, here we go. For internal business practices, one particular that is of very high importance and very high effort right now is providing reliable performance. If we're not on time, if our riders can't rely on us, that means that they're not able to get to where they need to go on time, and some of our riders will maybe not be willing to ride us, or at least not ride us as often if we are not reliable. The best performance we have, or the best measure for that we have that we track consistently, is on-time performance. You can see the target for each of the modes by the end of 2022, and you've heard updates from Doug on each of these. And then key strategic actions include continuing to deliver this agency-wide multifaceted strategy for improving service both on bus and rail, improving our support for operators, and benchmarking efforts across multiple agencies, so we really understand what's reasonable and what we should and can strive for. You can see the additional objectives that speak to internal business practices, the carryover. There are a number of those. And then an example out of customers, specifically about satisfied riders. An objective to increase ridership, which is the ultimate measure of whether our riders are satisfied. Are they riding more, and are more people riding?
No, Trimet ridership has been flat since McFarland has been in office, really. It's been flat for 6 or 7 years right now. I mean, 1 or 2% fluctuations, but no, ridership hasn't been increasing in a long time. Trimet ridership is down, and there's only 2 agencies in the country where ridership is up, and one of them is Seattle, and I forgot the other one. Maybe it's Houston. Yeah, I think it's Houston. So no, riders are not taking Trimet. The population's growing, but the ridership is stale. So let's see what he says about it.
The measure is to increase a percentage of annual boardings for bus and max, and as you just heard from Neil, we are slightly down this year. Right now we are between, I think, 0.4 and 0.6% down. The target for the first year or 2 is to stabilize that and bring the curve back up, and then to be hitting a 2% increase annually by FY22. that recognizes that we're investing somewhat more than 2%, but that we are both investing in the high ridership areas, but also in the more coverage areas where we don't have service, that we can't expect quite as much return, but still expect new riders. And we will do a number of efforts to try and increase ridership, both on new service, but also on existing ridership, some of these market segmentation efforts, and looking at first and last mile strategies to be able to connect with our service.
By the way, the lack of ridership hasn't stopped McFarland from getting his raises and bonuses or any of the other execs.
You can see the other objectives under customers, and that include our riders as well as our community stakeholders and the broader community. And then just quickly to wrap up, talking about the business plan timeline, this is the draft right now in April. It is available for comment, obviously not just to you but to the public, and if and whatever comments we have, we'll have a little bit of time to integrate those. We have anticipated right now that we would come back to you in May. If we get a lot of comments or we need to do additional analysis, we will obviously take just a little bit longer to make sure that we encompass those. During then FY 2018, that is when our first year implementation of this plan begins, including a very robust internal communications plan. All of the directors have heard much of this, but it all needs to be really worked through the entire agency to really be effective. We'll bring back, we proposed quarterly updates on the measures and key strategic actions. And then starting this fall, we'll begin an update for FY 2019 to this plan to identify how we're progressing on those items that we have identified and see what other updates need to be done. With that, I will stop.
Unfortunately, I can't see the actual material, so I'm limited in what I can respond to. I mean, it sounds like at least they're trying to improve things in terms of ridership, okay? At least it's on their radar finally that, hey, something's wrong here. People aren't riding. They need to get that ridership up, and they just need more reliable service. It really is that simple. And I've always said over and over, instead of 3 or 4 extra services, you need 10 or 20. I know, oh, we don't want to have a bunch of drivers sitting around. Well, if you don't have a bunch of drivers sitting around ready to move when a bus breaks down or the MAX screws up and they can jump into, if you don't do that, you're not going to have reliable service. And the transit agencies won't do that. They won't put in a padded operator, pool of operators standing by for when things go wrong. So that will always make the service poor. I mean, it's very simple to fix these things. Even me, a layman who's not some neoliberal transit planner, you know, not some Jarrett Walker type individual, knows what can be done. You need people to step in when things go wrong. You need to have a bunch of people ready to take over when a bus goes down, a train goes down.
Great. Thank you, Alan. The embedded in the plan is really a spectrum of making sure that we invest and we focus on, I'll call the core responsibilities of delivering great service. A lot of times people think about growth, but you don't want to lose your back end erosion, because that may get offset if you don't manage that as well. So we're managing the core responsibilities of safety and customer, etc. But you'll see embedded in here is really continuing to leverage a culture of innovation and actually celebrate in a formal way a culture of innovation, just like we do acknowledging and talk frequently about safety. So some of this will be not new for many people, some of this will be quite new for people, but not all great ideas come from a department of innovation. It's actually cultural in nature, that everybody gets to contribute to this. So we believe it hits the right balance from management's perspective all in all. Many items we do have underway. It's not as though we're just starting from zero. A lot are underway at different stages now. Yes, there's quite a number that are new here and will stretch and test, and in some cases actually transform the organization. As you can see in the details, we live in a changing world, and transit and public transportation is not exception from new technologies, new applications, and there's some excitement that can come with this, and there's some things that we have to be careful together while we manage the risk and the opportunity balance together. So we believe what we put forward to you today, and do welcome your comments, maybe initially from Director Simmons, Director Prosser, on any comments they have, kind of seen a little bit as management's been working this, and then any questions you may have as well.
Number one, thank you for the opportunity to be involved in the development of this plan. It was very educational and very inspirational. Not many organizations that I've been aware of in the public sector really take the time and invest the effort to put something like this together. One of the things I really appreciate.
You know, I find it somewhat insulting when these directors do this gushing shit they do. This, oh, you're so fabulous, nobody else does it. You know, I just think it's demeaning to the rest of us out here to have the board of directors just gushing all the time about the staff. That's all they ever do. There's never been any criticism of anything from these board, okay? The last person that was critical of them was Lynn Learback, recently deceased, by the way, who was kicked off the board by Kitzhaber. Kitzhaber the crook, which is why we have Brown. Yeah, I mean, I get tired of hearing this gushing. It turns me off.
About this plan is it does tie together existing guidelines and other plans. We're not recreating those. We're not changing those substantially, if at all. But we're bringing them together into a whole. You know, and speaking from the strategic financial plan guidelines, you know, I was heavily involved in putting those together. You know, I think that was good work. We have good information, but because it's labeled finance, not everybody thinks it applies to them. Yeah. But the fact that it's tied into this, and you know, it's part and parcel, it does, I think, emphasize all those other plans that we have out there are part of a greater whole. And so I think that is really worthwhile. You know, we did talk about that putting this together, we had a very condensed timeline. And there was some discussion about whether we take more time to put together something that, you know, is more complete, more polished, more finished. But that came at a cost of putting this thing off basically for another year. And the decision was made, no, we need to get started on this. You know, we can consider this kind of the first step, and as we do these annual updates, we'll get more refinement, more polish. But this was, I feel, is a very good effort, and I do appreciate all of the staff that were involved on this. So, thank you.
I agree with Craig on all the points that he raised. I think it's important to have a document that is both known internally and externally, that you're looking at the whole organization and not just pieces of the organization, and how it all fits into the mission, vision, and values of the organization. I agree in terms of the acceleration of timeline. Kudos to the staff. This is a yeoman's effort. Unlike Craig, I'm very familiar with business plans, and all organizations that I've worked with have always had a business plan, so I was pleased to see that Trimet was moving in that direction.
I like this woman. This woman is sharp, and she's getting in the nuts and bolts here. She just made a criticism there. She actually criticized Trimet. You heard it right. She said, every business I've been involved with has had a plan. And I congratulate you for finally getting on board. And she did it very skillfully. She did it very, in an up tone. She did it very up. You know, she didn't accuse. She did it by being positive. She criticized but was positive. I like that.
One thing that as one board member I would say to you is I actually think semi-annual reporting is sufficient. I'd hate to see staff, some of these things are going to take time, and the time it takes to create a report takes people away from doing the work. And so I would urge you, instead of quarterly reporting, to consider semi-annual reporting in order to make it more, fit more into the work that's already going on within the organization. But thank you for the opportunity to participate. I really enjoyed that.
Other comments? You okay?
You know, I think this is excellent, and I learned a lot reading this. I appreciated actually the glossary at the end with your acronyms.
This board member is more or less a wallflower. She reminds me of that. What was her name? Espinoza. There was a woman, I forgot her name now. She was supposedly Hispanic. She never said anything at the board meeting. She was basically a wallflower. That's who this one reminds me of. And she, you know, thank you, it's great, we love you, blah, blah.
But I see on page 12, there's something called salary placement form that wasn't in the glossary, so I think that needs to be added. I don't know what a salary placement form is.
Okay.
Got it.
That's minor, but I thought I'd mention it to you.
Oh, I guess I'm wrong. I guess she was paying attention. She noticed that minor little detail, which means she had to read it, right?
And you know, here's something else that may not be this may not be the time to add it to the business plan, but I guess I wanted to reiterate that I would hope in the future Trimet would make a commitment to employ people with disabilities. I see on page 13 there's reference.
Wow, I never thought of that. I remember one guy, in the 15 years I was there, I remember one guy who had disabilities. He was working in customer service in one of those blue outfits, tooling around in his wheelchair. But that's a good point. I've never seen people with disabilities at Trimet. I don't remember seeing any in any office anywhere that I moved around in the agency for the 15 years I was there. Not one.
To achieving affirmative action goals, and I would, again, this may not be the time, but I hope someday in the future that we have as a goal really being intentional around employing people with disabilities. And I want to tell you that OHSU has undertaken an effort to really deliberately bring in potentially hundreds of people with disabilities as employees, and they've devoted resources to that. So that's something I hope we'll think about in the future.
Great. Great comment. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good comment.
It's the first time I had a chance to look at it, so I'll hold my comments.
Yeah. I guess my comments are, first off, is thank you for work of the board members and the staff on this. This is a really good start, and it's going to take some time to flesh it out and understand how it works and how it will tie into our annual budgets and all that. I guess I would just wanted to comment, the increased ridership one is an example where, the Director Stovall and I have talked about, what is it going to really take? Yes, to develop strategies, but again, back to his kind of the root cause. What are the, as an example, what are the things that we can do almost in a paradigm shift? This is me looking at in the future more, to really make a dramatic change in ridership. Is it just incremental service and increases, or what else do we have to do? So as you develop this, I'll look forward to you actually identifying some of those key issues that I think are critical to the success of Trimet in the future. And I happen to believe one of the big things that we need to do to be successful in the future is dramatically increase our ridership. Yeah, I mean, we should not be talking about what do we have to do to stem the small, reductions that we've been seeing recently. But it would be really good to understand why that is occurring, and then what do we have to change. And so I'm looking forward to this kind of being a process that will frankly identify some of those key areas for us as a business that are critical to our ultimate success. So keep at it.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Well, I'm glad that it's on their radar that the ridership has been flat, and that is an objective measure of your lack of success. Okay, you can't hide that fact that more people have moved to Portland, but they're not riding, so there's obvious failure. And part of that is it's too crowded. The system's too crowded. It's not reliable enough. I don't care what statistics they put out. I listen to the operation. I hear all the junk. Every time I say junk bus in a tweet, you know, I tweet the dispatch. If I put that, means that's a bus that's disabled or not moving or whatever. And every bus that breaks down means up to 40 people inconvenienced. Every train that breaks down is a possible 100 people who are inconvenienced. And, you know, how many times do you have that happen to you? If you have a choice of driving, how many times do you want to be stranded or inconvenienced before you say, fuck it? I mean, it's not rocket science. You don't need great studies. I know, ask any driver, ask Dan Christensen, to ask the Deacon and Blue, ask anybody who's been writing about this or following, they'll tell you, you don't need a doctorate in transit planning to understand why people aren't riding TriMet.